Commander Natalie Wright stared at the screen in the dim light of her office at International Space Alliance headquarters. The message displayed before her made her heart race. After decades of searching the stars for signs of intelligent life, humanity had received its first confirmed alien transmission. It was not a greeting or a declaration of existence. It was a desperate call for help. She read through it again, trying to process what this meant for humanity. The message had traveled across vast stretches of space from a species calling themselves the Valorians. According to their transmission, they were under attack by a ruthless enemy they named the Devourers. Their star charts showed their home, system, and the advancing threat. Without intervention, the Valorians claimed they faced extinction within months. Natalie ran her fingers through her short brown hair and took a deep breath. She needed to inform her superiors immediately. In Montana, Frank Martinez chopped firewood outside his cabin nestled in the mountains. The repetitive motion helped clear his mind. After 15 years as a Navy SEAL and another 5 working classified missions, he had retreated to this quiet place to find peace. The sound of tires on gravel broke his concentration. He set down his axe and watched a black government SUV approach. He knew before they stepped out that his retirement was over. 2 men in dark suits emerged from the vehicle. The taller one spoke first. "Mr. Martinez, we need you to come with us. National security matter." Frank crossed his arms. "I'm retired." The second man held out a folder. "Sir, you've been selected for a mission only you can lead. Please review this." Frank took the folder and opened it. His eyes widened as he read about an alien distress call and plans for an interstellar rescue mission. According to the file, his combat experience and psychological profile made him the ideal candidate to lead a human crew into unknown territory. He looked up at the agents. "When do we leave?" The emergency session of the United Nations Security Council was filled with tension. Representatives from major world powers argued over the appropriate response to the alien message. "We cannot risk human lives based on an unverified distress call," said the French delegate. "This could be a trap." The Russian representative nodded in agreement. "If these aliens are at war, why should Earth become involved?" Dr. Helen Patel stood at the podium, her patience wearing thin. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had spent the past week analyzing the Valorian biological data included in their transmission. "Members of the Council, you're missing the significance of what we've discovered," she said. Based on the physiological details the Valorians shared, humans evolved on what they would consider a death world. Our gravity, atmospheric composition, radiation levels, and biological challenges would kill most sentient species in the galaxy. She displayed comparative charts on the main screen. "We're not just able to help them. According to their own data, we may be their only hope. We possess physical capabilities these aliens can barely comprehend." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The American delegate was the first to speak. "Dr. Patel, are you suggesting humans have an evolutionary advantage?" Helen nodded. "Precisely. What we consider normal, they consider extreme. The environmental conditions created by these devourers would be lethal to Valorians, but potentially manageable for humans. We've spent our entire existence adapting to hostile conditions. Now that adaptation might save another species." Frank stood, in the massive hangar, looking up at humanity's first interstellar vessel. The ISV Venture gleamed under the bright lights, its hull marked with the flags of 17 nations that had contributed to its hasty construction. The ship utilized experimental warp technology, reverse-engineered from specifications included in the Valorian transmission. Engineers worked around the clock making final adjustments before launch. A voice behind him pulled Frank from his thoughts. "Impressive, isn't it?" Commander Wright extended her hand. "Natalie Wright, I've been overseeing the communication aspects of this mission." Frank shook her hand. "Frank Martinez. They tell me I'm leading the crew once we're out there." Natalie studied him. 19 lives will be in your hands, Martinez. Plus potentially an entire alien civilization." Frank nodded. "No pressure." Natalie led him to a quieter corner of the hangar. "There's something you should know. She handed him a small crystal data device. This contains the complete Valorian message. The version released to the public and even to most military personnel was edited. Frank turned the crystal in his hand. Edited how? Natalie lowered her voice. There are inconsistencies in their story. References to previous conflicts that don't match their claim of being a purely peaceful species. Star charts showing territorial boundaries that shift between different parts of their message. She looked directly into his eyes. Find out what they're not telling us before you commit our people to this fight. The crew selection process had been intense, combining psychological evaluations, specialized skills, and physical capabilities. By launch day, Frank had memorized each member's file. Lieutenant Amber Collins would serve as tactical officer, her background in military intelligence and strategic planning making her invaluable. Kyle Rodriguez, the ship's engineer, had helped design the Venture's revolutionary propulsion system. Dr. Peter Lee, their AI specialist, would manage the complex computer systems and communication technology. Specialists Olivia Garcia and Eric Wilson were responsible for external operations and repairs. The remaining 14 crew members included medical personnel, scientists, and security specialists, each chosen for their unique skills and psychological resilience. Launch day arrived with little ceremony. The mission was too urgent and too risky for public fanfare. The 20 crew members boarded the Venture after brief goodbyes to family and colleagues. Frank was the last to enter, pausing to look back at the Earth he might never see again. The ship hummed with energy as final preparations were completed. Frank took his position on the bridge. All stations report status. One by one, his crew confirmed their readiness. The countdown began. In mission control, Natalie watched the monitors as the Venture's engines engaged. Godspeed, she whispered, as the ship rose from its launch pad and accelerated toward the stars. The journey to Valorian space would take 3 months using the experimental warp drive. As Earth disappeared behind them, Frank gathered his crew. We're making history today, he said. First humans to leave our solar system. First to answer an alien distress call. First to potentially engage in interstellar conflict. He looked at each face in turn. But we're also heading into unknown territory with limited information. Our mission is to assist the Valorians against this threat, but we maintain caution. We don't know everything about this situation yet. He held up the data crystal Natalie had given him. Our first task is to analyze all Valorian communications for any details we might have missed. We need to know exactly what we're flying into. As the Venture accelerated to warp speed, the stars outside blurred into streaks of light. Humanity's first interstellar rescue mission was underway, carrying 20 men and women toward an uncertain fate among the stars. The Venture had been traveling through space for 3 months when Lieutenant Amber Collins noticed something strange in the Valorian military data she was studying during her off hours. She sat alone in the ship's small tactical room surrounded by holographic displays showing battle formations and attack patterns described by the aliens. The more she analyzed the information, the more troubled she became. Amber ran her hand through her short blonde hair and made another note in her tablet. The Valorians had described the Devourers as mindless destroyers, yet the attack patterns she was seeing showed clear strategic thinking. There was purpose behind every move, not random destruction. She needed to show this to Frank. Amber gathered her findings and headed to the bridge where Frank spent most of his time. "Captain, I need to talk to you about the Valorian data," she said quietly so only he could hear. Frank nodded and followed her back to the tactical room. She pulled up her analysis. "Look at these attack patterns. The Devourers aren't just destroying everything in their path. They're systematically targeting specific types of planets and avoiding others." Frank studied the displays. "You're right. This doesn't match what the Valorians told us." He remembered Natalie's warning about inconsistencies. "Keep digging, Collins. I want to know what we're really flying into." In the engineering section, Kyle Rodriguez was running tests on the Venture's hull materials. The ship had been designed to withstand the harshest conditions on Earth, from crushing ocean depths to volcanic heat. Kyle compared his findings with the Valorian technical database. They had been provided. His eyes widened as he realized what he was seeing. He immediately called Frank on the intercom. "Captain, you need to see this." When Frank arrived, Kyle pointed to his screen. "According to the Valorian specifications for ship construction, our hull is nearly indestructible by their standards. The metals and composites we used because they work well on Earth are considered exotic super materials out here." He tapped another display. "The Valorians build their ships with materials that would crumble under Earth gravity or melt in our atmosphere. We built the Venture to survive Earth conditions. By alien standards, we're flying a tank." Frank placed a hand on the wall of the ship, feeling a new appreciation for the vessel. "Good work, Rodriguez. Keep testing our systems against their standards. I want to know all our advantages." Dr. Peter Lee spent weeks working with the communication systems, trying to establish contact with any Valorian outposts ahead of their arrival. His persistence finally paid off when a weak signal connected with a small Valorian listening post near the edge of their territory. The alien who appeared on the screen had pale blue skin and large, sensitive eyes. Peter called Frank to the communication room immediately. When the captain arrived, the alien was visibly shocked, its large eyes blinking rapidly at the sight of human faces. "Your species shows remarkable resilience," the translator conveyed after the alien spoke in a musical language. "The atmosphere visible through your viewports would kill most Valorians instantly." Frank leaned forward. "We come in response to your distress call. We're still 3 weeks from your main territories. Can you update us on the Devourer threat?" The alien hesitated before responding. "The situation remains critical. Our colonies continue to fall. Your assistance is urgently needed." Peter noticed the alien's eyes darting to something off-screen. "We must end transmission now. Safe journey, humans." The screen went dark. Frank gathered his senior crew after the communication. "They seemed surprised to see us breathing our normal air," he said. "Dr. Lee, what do we know about Valorian biology from their data?" Peter pulled up the relevant information. "Their atmosphere has much less oxygen than ours and almost no nitrogen. They extract nutrients directly from mineral sources rather than organic food. Their bodies are adapted to lower gravity and pressure." Amber nodded. "That explains why. They can't fight in the environments the Devourers create. But why send for humans specifically?" Frank thought about this. "Let's find out what else makes us different from them. Everyone, compare human capabilities to Valorian standards in your areas of expertise." A few days later, specialists Olivia Garcia and Eric Wilson discovered another surprising difference during a routine spacewalk to repair communication equipment. The standard-issue environmental suits they wore, designed for human comfort in space, offered protection far beyond what Valorians would need. Eric moved with ease in conditions that the Valorian database classified as extreme hazard zones. Inside their helmets, the two specialists shared a look of realization. "Our basic equipment is like advanced battle armor to them," Olivia said as they worked on the antenna array. "No wonder they called us." When they returned inside, they immediately reported their findings to Frank. "Captain, the suits we use for basic protection would be considered military grade by Valorian standards," Eric explained. "Their normal space activities are conducted in conditions much more controlled than what we're used to." Frank nodded grimly as another piece of the puzzle fell into place. As the Venture approached Valorian space, they received a new transmission, showing the devastating aftermath of a Devourer attack on a major colony. The images were shocking. Once beautiful crystal cities reduced to rubble, strange plant life growing through the ruins, and the environment itself transformed into something that looked surprisingly Earth-like. The surviving Valorians were confined to sealed domes where they maintained their native atmosphere. Frank called an all-hands meeting in the ship's largest compartment. All 20 crew members gathered as he displayed the transmission. "We were sent because humans can survive conditions others can't," he told his crew. "But I'm starting to think we were sent because humans can fight in ways these aliens can't even imagine." He turned to Amber. "Lieutenant Collins, what's your assessment of what we're seeing?" Amber stepped forward. "The Devourers aren't just destroying. They're transforming these worlds into environments that look remarkably similar to parts of Earth. Forests, oceans, atmospheric composition. It's like they're creating Earth-like conditions that are toxic to Valorians. Frank nodded. Rodriguez, what about our weapon systems? Kyle crossed his arms. Our lasers and projectile weapons are based on Earth military technology, but they're far more powerful than anything in the Valorian database. Even our personal firearms would be considered heavy artillery by their standards. Frank looked at each crew member in turn. We're about to enter a conflict we don't fully understand yet. The Valorians haven't told us everything, but one thing is clear. They called humans because we're built differently. We evolved on a world that would kill them instantly. Our natural abilities and technology give us advantages they desperately need. He paused, letting his words sink in. But that doesn't mean we rush in blindly. When we arrive, we observe first. We learn everything we can about both sides in this conflict, and we remember that we represent Earth on this mission. The crew nodded in understanding, a mix of determination and caution on their faces. That night, Frank sat alone in his quarters, studying the complete Valorian message on the data crystal Natalie had given him. There was something about the Devourers that the Valorians weren't saying, some connection they were hiding. As the Venture continued its approach to Valorian space, the ship's sensors detected the massive ring of automated defense platforms that surrounded the alien home system. We're here, Amber announced from her station on the bridge. Frank took his place in the command chair. Open a channel. Let them know Earth has answered their call. As the ship moved toward the defense perimeter, the entire crew felt the weight of history on their shoulders. They were the first humans to enter another species' territory, the first to answer a call for help from the stars. Whatever awaited them among the Valorians, they would face it together, representatives of a world that had forged them stronger than they knew. The Venture passed through the massive ring of defense platforms surrounding Valorian space, after exchanging security codes provided in the original message. Frank stood on the bridge watching as the alien home system came into view. Dozens of planets orbited a pale blue star, many surrounded by shimmering structures that looked like webs of light. A voice crackled over the communication system, speaking in careful English. Earth Vessel Venture, we welcome you to Valorian space. Please proceed to coordinates being transmitted to your navigation system. Amber verified the coordinates on her console. It's a space station near the fourth planet, Captain. Frank nodded. Take us in, steady approach. All crew to first contact positions. The Venture moved forward through the alien system, passing ships that looked like delicate crystal sculptures compared to the sturdy human vessel. The crew marveled at the sight of actual alien civilization spread out before them. Everything about the Valorian construction seemed to emphasize grace and lightness, with thin spires and flowing shapes that would never withstand Earth gravity. The Valorian station grew larger in their viewports, a spinning wheel of shining material with spokes connecting to a central hub. The Venture docked at an airlock specially modified for their arrival. Frank selected his landing party. Himself, Dr. Lee for communication, Lieutenant Collins for security assessment, and Kyle Rodriguez to evaluate Valorian technology. They wore their standard uniforms rather than environmental suits after confirming. The meeting chamber had been adjusted to Earth normal conditions. The airlock cycled and Frank led his team into the station. They were met by a delegation of Valorians, led by a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin that seemed to shimmer with subtle colors. Despite the adjusted gravity in the chamber, the aliens moved with visible effort, their thin limbs struggling against what was for humans a comfortable environment. The lead Valorian bowed slightly. I am Ambassador Threll of the Valorian Collective. We are grateful for your response to our call for assistance. Up close, Frank could see the alien's large, multifaceted eyes and the delicate gill-like structures at the sides of its neck that fluttered with each breath. Threll gestured to the meeting table. Please join us. Forgive our discomfort, but your natural environment would crush most species in our coalition. This is why your help is so vital. The Devourers attack with environmental weapons that create conditions similar to your Earth. Frank and his team sat across from the Valorian delegation. We've come to help, Ambassador, but we need to understand exactly what we're facing. Our analysis of your data has raised questions about the nature of this conflict. Threll's skin colors shifted to deeper blues. Of course, we will share all relevant information. While the diplomatic meeting continued, Lieutenant Collins requested permission to present her analysis of the Devourer attack patterns. She displayed the charts she had prepared during their journey. The Devourers aren't attacking population centers first. They're systematically targeting worlds with specific mineral compositions. She highlighted several planets on the star map. All of these attacked worlds share similar characteristics, certain rare elements in their crusts, specific atmospheric potential, particular orbital parameters. The Valorian military representative, a shorter alien introduced as Commander Zenith, leaned forward with interest. Your observation is accurate, Lieutenant Collins. The Devourers select worlds based on transformation potential rather than tactical value. Frank crossed his arms. Transformation for what purpose? Zenith and Threll exchanged looks. Zenith's voice was deeper than Threll's when he spoke. They are not simply conquerors. They harvest resources, while making planets uninhabitable to Valorians. Dr. Lee had been quiet during the exchange, but now he spoke up. Ambassador Threll, we need to understand who or what the Devourers actually are. Are they a species like yourselves or something else? There was an uncomfortable silence before Threll responded. The Devourers are not a traditional military force. They are biological terraforming engines deployed by a species we have never directly encountered. We call them Devourers because they consume worlds as we know them and remake them into something else. Zenith reluctantly activated a holographic display showing detailed scans of Devourer units. These units are semi-autonomous, designed to transform environments to specific parameters. They appear to be preparing worlds for colonization by their creators. Frank studied the images carefully. These environmental changes they create, you said they're similar to Earth conditions? Threll's skin pulsed with nervous color patterns. Yes. The atmospheric composition, gravity, radiation levels, and biological systems they introduce are remarkably compatible with what we've learned about your world. This is why we believed humans might be able to intervene where we cannot. Our bodies simply cannot function in the environments they create. The implications of this statement hung heavy in the air. Collins and Lee exchanged concerned glances, while Rodriguez studied the technical specifications of the Devourer units with growing interest. Frank kept his expression neutral. Ambassador, we need to see one of these transformed worlds. I want to observe the Devourers in action. Commander Zenith offered to lead a small reconnaissance mission to a nearby system where a Valorian colony was currently under Devourer occupation. Frank selected Dr. Lee to accompany him, while Collins and Rodriguez remained on the station to gather more intelligence. The Valorian scout ship was faster than the Venture but felt fragile compared to the human vessel. Inside its transparent hull, Frank and Dr. Lee watched stars blur past as they traveled. What do you make of all this, Lee? Frank asked quietly. The AI specialist shook his head. There's more to this story than they're telling us. The compatibility between Devourer terraforming and Earth conditions can't be coincidence. Zenith approached them, moving carefully in the ship's gravity. We are approaching the Nellis system. Please prepare yourselves. The sight can be disturbing. The scout ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel near a small blue-green planet. From orbit, it looked strikingly Earth-like, with oceans, clouds, and land masses covered in vegetation. Zenith activated a view screen showing the surface in detail. This was once a Valorian mining colony with protective domes and controlled environments. The Devourers arrived 6 months ago. The images showed what had once been crystalline Valorian structures now overgrown with trees and plants that looked remarkably like Earth vegetation. Massive Devourer units moved through the landscape, releasing spores and manipulating the environment. The few remaining Valorian settlements were sealed domes where survivors clung to their native conditions. The atmosphere outside those domes would kill a Valorian in minutes, Zenith explained. Yet according to our scans, it would be perfectly breathable for humans. Frank and Dr. Lee exchanged stunned looks. Those aren't alien plants, Lee whispered. That's an earth forest, pine trees, oak, maple, and those are earth animals. The screen showed creatures moving through the new forest. Deer-like animals, birds flying between trees, even insects buzzing around flowers. How is this possible? Frank asked. Zenith's voice was solemn. We do not know who created the Devourers or why they seek to transform worlds this way. We only know we cannot survive the changes they bring. Frank watched the Devourer units with new understanding. They weren't weapons of war. They were terraforming machines creating habitable worlds, habitable for humans. When they returned to the Valorian station, Frank immediately gathered his team and confronted Ambassador Threll with their discovery. You didn't call us because we can help you fight, he said, eyes fixed on the ambassador. You called us because we're compatible with whatever the Devourers are working for. You're hoping we can communicate with them in ways you can't. Threll's skin flushed deep purple. Captain Martinez, your insight is correct. We believe the Devourers might respond differently to beings who can thrive in the environments they create. Our scientists theorize there may be a connection between Earth and whoever controls these terraforming engines. Frank felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of connection? Threll looked at each human face before answering. We believe the force behind the Devourers may be returning to reclaim worlds they once controlled. Worlds they seeded with life similar to Earth's. Worlds they may consider rightfully theirs. The days following their discovery were intense as the human crew integrated with the Valorian defense fleet. The venture was positioned as a key vessel in their strategy, since it could operate in environments that would destroy Valorian ships. Frank ordered the crew to begin training their alien allies in adaptive combat tactics. The Valorians proved to be brilliant strategists with advanced technology, but they were physically fragile and overly dependent on automated systems. Sergeant Lisa Foster, the Venture's combat instructor, set up training sessions in one of the station's larger chambers. She watched with amazement as Valorian soldiers struggled with concepts that were second nature to humans. No, you need to keep fighting even if systems are damaged, she explained to a group of Valorian officers. Improvise with whatever materials are available. The aliens stared at her with their large eyes. Fighting through damage? Improvising weapons? One asked in confusion. These concepts are not in our tactical database. Lisa exchanged looks with Frank, who was observing the session. Your people have never had to adapt during battle? The Valorian commander's skin shifted to a pale yellow. Our bodies are not designed to endure stress or damage. When systems fail, we retreat to preserve life. Meanwhile, Dr. Lee and Kyle Rodriguez worked with Valorian scientists to establish direct communication with a captured Devourer processing node. The node was contained in a sealed chamber, continuing its programmed functions on collected soil samples. Rodriguez adjusted the interface connections while Lee programmed a series of queries. If these are terraforming tools rather than weapons, they must have some form of command and control system, Lee explained to the Valorian scientists. We need to understand how they communicate and who they answer to. After hours of careful work, they managed to extract base programming data from the node. Lee stared at his screen, his face growing pale. Rodriguez, look at this identification protocol. The engineer leaned over to see the code Lee had isolated. Is that what I think it is? Lee nodded slowly. The node identifies humans as genetic, cousins to its creators. It's programmed to recognize our DNA pattern as friendly. The Valorian scientists crowded around, their skin colors shifting rapidly, and what the humans had learned was their equivalent of excited conversation. This confirms our theories, said the lead scientist. The species we call progenitors must have some connection to humanity. While this research continued, Lieutenant Collins and Specialist Wilson conducted their own investigation. They had noticed restricted areas within the Valorian archives and security protocols that seemed excessive even in wartime. Using skills from her intelligence background, Collins created a distraction while Wilson gained access to a secured data terminal. What they found shook them to their core. Captain, we need to talk privately. Collins told Frank when they returned to the venture. In the ship's secure room, she displayed the files they had extracted. The Valorians have been hiding the truth about this conflict. According to these historical records, millions of years ago, two advanced civilizations fought a war across this region of the galaxy. One group was called the Progenitors. The other became what we now know as the Valorian Alliance. Wilson pointed to a star chart showing ancient territorial boundaries. The Progenitors were defeated and driven from this entire sector, but before they left, they seeded certain planets with genetic material. Frank studied the data with growing concern. Earth was one of those planets, wasn't it? Collins nodded grimly. According to these records, Earth was a forgotten progenitor world, where their genetic material evolved in isolation. We're distant descendants of the progenitors, Captain, and now they appear to be coming back to reclaim their territory. Frank immediately called Ambassador Threll to the venture for an emergency meeting. The ambassador arrived with Commander Zenith, both looking uncomfortable in the Earth-normal gravity of the human ship. Frank wasted no time. Ambassador, we know the truth about the progenitors and their connection to humanity. I want a full explanation of what's really happening here. Threll's skin darkened to deep blue, a sign of distress the humans had learned to recognize. Captain Martinez, please understand our position. When we detected devourer activity after millennia of peace, we feared the return of an ancient enemy. When we discovered Earth and realized humans could survive in progenitor-transformed environments, we saw an opportunity. Zenith continued where Threll hesitated. Our scientists developed a theory. If we could show the progenitors that another, sentient species had evolved on one of their seeded worlds, they might halt their reclamation efforts. We never anticipated how different you would be from us, how adapted to conflict, how willing to face danger. Frank paced the room, processing this revelation. So you sent a distress call to Earth, hoping we would help you communicate with the progenitors, not fight them. Threll's skin shifted to a calmer green. Yes, though we were prepared for either outcome. The progenitors were always more aggressive than Valorian species, more willing to take risks. These traits seem to have been passed to humanity. Frank stopped pacing and looked directly at the ambassador. Why not tell us this from the beginning? Threll's reply was simple. Would your people have responded to a message saying you might be descended from an ancient alien species returning to reclaim their territory? Would Earth governments have sent a ship if they knew the connection? Frank had to admit the ambassador had a point. Earth might have viewed such a claim with extreme skepticism or even hostility. Dr. Lee joined the meeting with a report from his research team. The Devourer node is part of an automated terraforming system designed to prepare worlds for progenitor habitation. It's not actually a weapon, though its effects are lethal to Valorians. According to the programming we've decoded, the node recognizes human genetic patterns as a variant of progenitor DNA. It's classified us as genetic cousins. Ambassador Threll leaned forward with interest. Then communication might be possible. If the full progenitor fleet arrives, humans might be able to negotiate where we cannot. Frank crossed his arms. You're asking us to be your diplomats to a species we've never met based on a genetic connection from millions of years ago? Zenith answered with unexpected directness. We are asking you to help prevent a war that could destroy both our civilizations. The Valorian Alliance cannot survive in progenitor environments, and we will fight to preserve our worlds, but that fight would cost billions of lives on both sides. As they discussed possible approaches, the station's alert system activated with a blaring alarm. Zenith rushed to a communication panel, his movements urgent despite the strain of Earth. Gravity. Long-range sensors have detected a massive vessel entering the system, he announced, his voice tight with tension. It's unlike any Devourer unit we've seen before. This is a true progenitor ship. The ambassador's skin went almost white with shock. They weren't supposed to arrive for another cycle. The terraforming is barely underway on most worlds. Frank moved quickly to the Venture's bridge, ordering his crew to battle stations while maintaining communication with the Valorian command center. The ship's sensors soon confirmed what the Valorians had detected. An enormous vessel approaching the system, dwarfing anything in the Valorian fleet. It appeared organic in design, resembling a massive living entity rather than a constructed ship. It's responding to the modified SOS we transmitted, Threll explained as they watched the vessels approach on the main view screen. We included Earth's coordinates in our message, hoping to establish the connection between your species and the progenitors. Frank turned to the ambassador with growing anger. You used Earth as bait? Before Threll could respond, the communication system activated. The massive progenitor ship had established a direct link to the venture, bypassing all Valorian security protocols. A message appeared on the main screen in perfect English. Kindred, join us aboard to discuss the reclamation of what was taken. The bridge fell silent as everyone stared at the message. Frank looked at his senior crew members, then back to Ambassador Threll. It seems the progenitors want to talk, he said quietly, but they want to talk to us, not you. Threll's skin swirled with complex patterns. Captain Martinez, what will you do? Frank stared at the massive ship on the view screen, considering humanity's position in this ancient conflict. Ambassador, you brought us into this situation under false pretenses. Now we'll find our own way through it. I'm going to accept their invitation. The progenitor vessel hung in space like a living mountain, its surface rippling with patterns of light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Frank stood in the venture's briefing room with his chosen diplomatic team. Dr. Lee for communication, Lieutenant Collins for security assessment, and Sergeant Foster for her practical combat perspective. The Valorians had spent the last hour trying to convince Frank not to accept the progenitor invitation. They cannot be trusted, Ambassador Threll insisted, his skin flashing warning colors. The progenitors were deceptive and dangerous even before their exile. Frank's patience had worn thin. With all respect, Ambassador, you brought us into this conflict with half-truths. You used Earth as bait in your game with the progenitors. Now we'll make our own decisions. Commander Zenith made one final attempt. At least allow our representatives to join your delegation. Frank shook his head. The message was clear. They want to speak with humans alone. We'll report back what we learn. The Valorians reluctantly withdrew, leaving the human team to prepare for the unprecedented meeting. A shuttle from the massive progenitor ship arrived to transport the human delegation. Unlike the crystalline elegance of Valorian design, the progenitor craft appeared to be grown rather than built, with smooth organic curves and surfaces that adjusted to touch. As they boarded, Frank noticed the atmosphere inside matched Earth conditions perfectly. The shuttle had no visible pilot or crew, yet it moved with purpose back toward the enormous mothership. Dr. Lee studied the interior with fascination. The technology is beyond anything I've seen, but there's something familiar about the design principles. Collins kept her hand near her sidearm, eyes constantly scanning for threats. Stay alert. We don't know what we're walking into. The shuttle approached what appeared to be a living membrane on the surface of the larger vessel. Instead of a mechanical docking procedure, the membrane simply opened to receive them, closing seamlessly behind as they entered. They emerged into a vast chamber that resembled a forest clearing more than a spacecraft interior. Living plants grew from the floor, trees stretched toward a ceiling that simulated Earth's sky, and a stream of clear water wound through the space. It's like a piece of Earth, Foster whispered, her hand unconsciously touching a nearby leaf. From among the trees, figures emerged, walking toward them. Frank felt a shock of recognition as he saw beings who appeared startlingly human-like, though taller and with subtle anatomical differences. Slightly larger eyes, longer fingers, and skin with a faint luminescent quality. "Welcome, kindred," said the foremost figure in perfect English. "I am Director Serene of the Progenitor, Reclamation Fleet. We have waited a long time to meet our distant children." Frank stepped forward as the designated representative of humanity. "I am Captain Frank Martinez of the Earth vessel Venture. We came in response to a distress call from the Valorian Alliance." Serene's expression showed a mix of amusement and disdain. "Yes, our old adversaries, always clever with their strategies. They detected our terraforming vanguard and immediately sought to use you against us." She gestured for the humans to follow her deeper into the forest-like chamber. Walk with me. There is much to discuss." As they walked, other progenitors watched them with open curiosity. Frank noticed they moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost supernatural. "Your physical resemblance to us is remarkable," Serene commented, "though you are shorter and more densely muscled. Adaptations to your high-gravity world, no doubt." They arrived at a clearing with a pool of water at its center, displaying holographic images of star systems. "Let me tell you our perspective, Captain Martinez," Serene began. "Long ago, the Progenitor Collective established a thriving civilization across this sector of the galaxy. We seeded compatible worlds with our genetic material, creating life that could one day evolve into new branches of our species. Earth was one such world, though more extreme in its conditions than most. The hologram showed Earth as it might have appeared millions of years ago. Then we encountered the species that would become the Valorian Alliance. They had a fundamentally different biology and view of existence. Conflict was inevitable. The images shifted to show ancient battles. Eventually, we were driven from this sector and retreated to distant stars to rebuild. Now we have returned to reclaim what was rightfully ours." Frank listened carefully, comparing this account with what the Valorians had told them. "And the terraforming?" he asked. "The Valorians call your machines devourers because they destroy their habitable worlds." Serene nodded. "An unfortunate necessity. Our biology cannot survive in the environments the Valorians prefer. Just as they would die in an Earth-like atmosphere, we would perish in theirs. The terraforming prepares worlds for our colonization by restoring conditions similar to those we originally established." Dr. Lee stepped forward with a question. "Why did you respond to our ship specifically? How did you know we were from Earth?" Serene smiled. "Your genetic pattern was included in the Valorian message, though they likely didn't realize its significance. We recognized you immediately as descendants of our seed world. You are, in essence, progenitors who evolved in isolation under extreme conditions." Lieutenant Collins had remained silent until now, analyzing everything she heard. "Director Serene, what are your intentions toward Earth?" The direct question seemed to please the progenitor leader. "Perceptive. We have no hostile intentions toward your world. In fact, we're fascinated by what you've become. You evolved on a world we designed as a wildlife preserve for our most robust specimens. It was considered too extreme for colonization, yet you not only survived but thrived there. Your species has accomplished in isolation what we might have guided you to do over millennia." Foster frowned. "Then why terraform Valorian worlds if peaceful coexistence is possible?" Serene's expression hardened. "The Valorians occupy worlds that were ours. They altered environments we created and claimed territories we ceded. They have refused all communication and attacked our terraforming units on site. We seek to restore what was taken from us." When the human delegation returned to the Valorian command station, they found the alien leaders in a state of high anxiety. "You survived," Ambassador Threll said with obvious relief, his skin cycling through patterns of blue and green. "What did the progenitors tell you?" Frank assembled both his crew and the Valorian leadership in the station's main chamber. "I've heard both sides of this conflict now," he began. "Two ancient civilizations fighting over territory with humanity, caught in the middle due to our genetic connection to the progenitors." He looked directly at Threll. "You brought us here under false pretenses, hoping to use our connection to negotiate or fight on your behalf." Then he turned to the communication screen showing Director Serene, who had agreed to join the discussion remotely. "And you see us as long-lost relatives who evolved on a world you abandoned, now potentially useful in your reclamation efforts." Frank moved to the center of the room. "Neither of your civilizations understands what you've awakened by contacting Earth. Humans spent our history fighting each other because we had no one else to fight. We evolved on a world both of you consider too extreme for comfortable habitation. We call it home." He looked at each alien face in turn. "I propose a three-way peace accord. Earth will establish diplomatic relations with both civilizations and provide a neutral intermediary. The progenitors will halt their terraforming of populated worlds instead focusing on uninhabited planets suitable for their physiology. The Valorians will acknowledge progenitor rights to certain unclaimed systems and cease attacks on their terraforming units. Both alien leaders began to object, but Frank continued firmly. This isn't a suggestion. It's the only way forward that doesn't end in a war that would devastate all three civilizations. We came as rescuers, discovered we were pawns, and now find ourselves as power brokers. Make no mistake. If you force this into war, we will end it. We've survived everything our planet could throw at us, and we're just getting started. The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. Slowly, hesitantly, Ambassador Threll's skin shifted to the pale yellow of acceptance. On the screen, Director Serene gave a slight nod. Perhaps there is wisdom in what you propose, kindred. We will consider your terms. As the venture prepared to return to Earth with representatives from both alien civilizations, Frank stood alone in his quarters, looking at the stars through his viewport. He thought about the incredible journey that had brought 20 humans across the galaxy and placed them at the center of an ancient conflict. He recorded a message to be transmitted ahead of their return. To Earth governments and the people of our world, humanity has entered the galactic stage. We came as rescuers, discovered we were pawns, and emerged as power brokers. The universe is stranger and more dangerous than we imagined, and it turns out so are we. Prepare to welcome representatives of two ancient civilizations. Earth is no longer alone among the stars, and we have much to learn about our place in this vast and complex galaxy.